Hi everyone, it's Alicia. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the study for Christ in all of Scriptures. This is going to be week 13. Sorry for the delay. I've been dealing with some health things and whatnot, so we'll get back on track here and get started with week 13. And now week 13 is the last for the very first volume of this study. So we will be taking a look at that and we'll be working through this last one. Okay, so the first one that we're going to talk about, and this is kind of set up a little bit different because it has pages in between, but we're going to be talking about the first one, Old Testament passage, which is Exodus 20:1 through 17. I will read through it quickly. Then God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have any other gods beside me. Do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above or on the earth below or in the waters under the earth. Do not bow and worship to them, and do not serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, bringing the consequences of the father's iniquity on the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female servant, your livestock, or the resident alien who is within your city gates. For the Lord God made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything in them in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may have a long life in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony against your neighbor. Do not covet your neighbor's house, do not covet your neighbor's wife, his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Okay, so essentially these are the 10 Commandments. And I think most of us, if not all, know about the 10 Commandments. So we'll have to kind of flip a little bit back and forth since some of the questions are on the other page. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. Also, just a note, I do use the Blue Letter Bible app. I also use a study Bible that is NLT, ESV, and then there's a couple of other apps that I use as well. I do plan on doing a review of some of my favorite Bibles, so look for that. And then also possibly a review on some of the apps that I use, some of the ones that I find super helpful. All right, so let's get started with this. So the first thing we do is highlight any words or phrases that point to Christ. And then also it asked us to write down each verb in each command. So I did that as well. We can talk about that on the next page. You'll see circle each command that gives instructions that relate to God, and underline commands that give instructions for relating to others. So let's take a look at the circles, the underlines, and then also the highlights. Okay. So as I went through, I did highlight, there's a lot here I think that relates back to Jesus, but I did highlight a bunch of things. There could be other things that you would highlight. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the place of slavery. So there I saw that this is similar to how Jesus saved us and brought us out of the slavery of sin. So I marked that part. Then do not have other gods beside me. So of course Jesus is part of the Trinity, and so there is only one God, and so to me that points to him as well. Do not make an idol for yourself. So again, the same thing as, do not have any other gods. Showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my command, and do not misuse the name of the Lord your God. So of course Jesus is also part of God, so that applies. And then as far as loving the generations, I mark that because Jesus loved all of the generations by doing what he did in his sacrifice. Then we talk about the seventh day of Sabbath, which again is just pointing to him because Jesus is our rest. When I looked this up, it said, he finished the work by doing the sacrifice and by freeing us, by taking on our sin. So basically we see him as our rest, and the Lord is saying the seventh day is the rest for us. For the Lord made the heavens and earth and everything in the 6 days. Again, pointing back to Jesus has been here since the beginning of time, and he is eternal. So I highlighted all of those. Then it asked us to circle things that related to how we're supposed to relate to God. So the things that relate to how we would interact with God would be not making an idol for ourselves. That's what he's asking us. Do not have any other gods beside us. Do not bow and worship to them. Do not misuse the name of the Lord. The Sabbath day. And that looks like all the circles that I have. And then the underlines was how should we interact with others, not God. And so for those I have over here, honoring the father and the mother, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, do not covet. So those were all the ones that I marked for that. All right, so as I went through, there was a lot. This was a very, very long passage and a lot to study. So again, I used a couple different study Bibles, went through Blue Letter Bible, did a few Google searches and things like that. And so these are some of the things that I came up with. Again, this is not a full list and I am not a scholar, but these are the things that I found and that I put together. So then God spoke all these words. So this is God basically giving us his moral code. This is the moral code from God as to how we should act. And the law is holy, just, and good. So if we look back, they always ask about attributes of God. So I had good, wise, holy, just, truthful, jealous, loving, merciful. So some of these are mentioned actually in the scripture here that we read. Also, we talked about Jesus saving us here. Yahweh, God of Israel, says, I am the Lord your God. So we know him also as Yahweh. And there's a lot of references here that you can take a note of. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit so we can get a better look at what we're doing so you guys can note anything down. If you want to do that, a lot of references from Deuteronomy. We have some Psalm references. This is idolatry, and there's a Leviticus entry there, 19:4. This is heavens above or on the earth below and the waters underneath. So when they're talking about idols, they're talking about people, things, possessions, even images. In one I saw, they talked about worshiping an image of Jesus, right? So we're not worshiping images or possessions or things like that. We're to be only worshiping God. All right, so then we also had a Leviticus here in Matthew as well, talking there, and then also the jealous God piece. I have a Deuteronomy and an Exodus. So again, here's where it says jealous God, and so that's why I put one of that as the attributes of God. And then this shows also his supreme love in action, right? So he's a jealous God. He wants us to only worship him. And so, this shows his love towards us, right? If he didn't love us, if we wouldn't love someone else, right, we might not get jealous about that. So that's what that shows. Over here we have generations of those who hate me. I have a John 7:7 reference. So this said, I always kind of got confused about this verse. Okay, so I've seen this before where it talks about bringing the consequences of the father's iniquities on the children. And so I think there's other passages in the Bible, and I should have looked, where it talks about the sins of the father. And I had always wondered about that, right? Because we all sin. But what I found, which is first time I've ever seen this, is if the descendant, so let's just say, for example, like my father sinned, and so according to this, like his consequences will be brought on to me, right? But it's saying if the descendants, being me, loves God, then there is no consequence. So that's one thing I found that I never really understood, and I felt like, that was a great thing for me to find during my research, because it really answered one of those questions. And I know other people have asked me that, like, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to pay for the sins of generations before me? And so this is what I found, and that's one of the interpretations. All right, moving on. So we have an Acts 2:39 and a John 4:19 reference. It says, showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my command. This is us receiving God's mercy. Do not misuse the name of the Lord. The Leviticus 19:12 on that one. This refers to profanity, frivolity, and hypocrisy, probably among many other things, but those were some of the things that they mentioned as I was looking through these. Remember the Sabbath day. So this is a sacred time of rest. You can look at Genesis 2:3 for some more information on that one. Then it says more on the seventh day of the Sabbath. Of course, as it reads below, God created everything in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh day. So even God rested on the seventh day. And this, when it's talking about Sabbath actually means to rest or cease from work. So that's actually what the word means. And then we did talk about Jesus as being our rest from finishing the work that needed to be done on the cross. Luke 13:14 is another good reference. For the Lord God made the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Genesis 2:2-3. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, that's Mark 2:27-28, and declared it holy. So this is serving God as a disciple, is how I saw that. And then also up here, we give a little bit of talk about after Jesus finished the work on the cross, believers enter into rest. So that's another way we are entering into rest because of the work that Jesus did on the cross. So as a believer, that lets us rest as far as that goes for our salvation. Moving on, honor your father and mother, Ephesians 6:1-3. This is a building block for the stability and health of society. And so if you think about it, in the world today, honoring your father and your mother is a way of showing respect. They provide discipline just like God does as well, for things that we may do wrong. That's our free will. And so doing that is the building block for stability. That gives us stability as children as we grow up, right? So that's super important as to why he's saying honor your father and your mother. And then in Ephesians 6:2, it tells us rebellion is costly. So that's another really good one to look up. Deuteronomy 5:17 on the do not murder says that's kind of about hatred. So of course, obviously murdering is typically hand in hand with hatred, but it may not be. But it does specifically reference hatred there. Do not commit adultery. That could do with lust, and it can also do with the heart or the mind. So when you think of adultery, it could be, a physical type of a thing, but it also is, something that you might think in your mind or feel in your heart, even though you're not actually doing anything physically. This is how it was described in the research. So it kind of, goes across a couple different things there and not just the physical part of it. Do not steal. So in this one, this also talked about honoring God with our finances. So many times, I'm sure if you go to church or you've read other parts of the Bible, they'll talk about tithing with your finances. And so this do not steal said it also refers back to giving back to God with our finances, and whatever way that might be. That's what it's talking about there. We have a couple of references here: Hebrews 13:4, Ephesians 4:28. Do not give false testimony against your neighbor, and then do not covet your neighbor's, house, wife, etc., etc. Couple references there: Exodus 23:6-7, James looks like 4:11. And this is covet is desire or pant after, is what I found on that word. Also, I had a star here next to Hebrews 13:5, so that's another great reference that you should look up. When we talk about false testimony, we talk about slander, lying, gossip, those types of things. And then also with the coveting, that also pointed back to dissatisfaction of what we have and jealousy. So jealousy over things that other people have that we don't, that we might want. That's basically coveting. Dissatisfaction of what we have. I never really thought of it that way, actually. But it really is. If you're, kind of going after or wanting something, desiring something that somebody else has, no matter what it is, that really is dissatisfaction of what we have. And we should be satisfied with the things that we have, as God provides everything that we need. As you read through scripture, you will find that. So I thought that was very interesting as well. So I made a few notes down here at the bottom. To honor is to cherish, care, respect, and revere, when we talk about honoring the father and the mother. The first 9 commands of the commandments focus on things that we should do. So it talks about, don't make an idol, don't murder, don't, do all these different things. The 10th deals with the heart and its desires. So the do not covet piece, that deals with our heart, right? And not basically on things we do. All right. So I thought that was all very interesting. Okay. So now we're going to move on to the New Testament. Let's make sure we can get that into the screenshot. Okay. So the New Testament passage is Matthew 5:17-20. So we'll just read through that quickly. Don't think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or one stroke of a letter will pass away from the law until all things are accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so if we look over here, we're going to highlight things that point to Christ. I honestly highlighted the whole thing because, I just felt the whole thing is all about Christ. So we'll go through that. Then underline the word fulfill in verse 17. So I did do that in verse 17. So you can see there I kind of triple and quadrupled that one just to kind of point it out. And it says, who are they speaking to? So in this is basically the Sermon on the Mount, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, if not everyone. So this is the great multitudes that are coming from many different regions, and also the disciples. And this is who Jesus is speaking to. Okay. So it says, circle the 2 types of people Jesus describes in verse 19. What are the consequences of the actions for each type of person? So he's talking here about whoever breaks the commands and whoever doesn't break the commands. So those are the 2 different types of people: the breaking of the commands, and then also teaching others about not breaking the commands. So he says that one will be called least in heaven, which could mean damnation, but it could also just mean less rewards in heaven. we're not really sure if it means you don't get into heaven or not, but you're definitely least in heaven versus someone who is teaching others about, the word and following the commands. Those are the greatest in heaven. So as far as that's as far as the consequences there. And then I also just made a note here: kingdom righteousness works from the inside out because it first produces changed hearts and new motivations. So I found that in my study Bible and I thought it was really good. Okay, so we'll just move over to the other side. Also, some of the attributes for sovereign, eternal, just, holy, infinite, and omnipotent is what I had listed. All right, so start to go through the passage. So here we have, don't think I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. So Colossians 2:14 is a reference there. Jesus came to establish the law and prophets. So, and the prophets, the people, prophets, not profits like money. So I had a note for that on the fulfillment of that. And when it says, for truly I tell you, this states importance. When he says for truly, the truly part states importance. And we have an Isaiah 42:21 reference. And then over here, when we talk about heaven and earth passing away, there's a Luke and a Matthew reference on that one as well. So moving down, therefore whoever breaks one of the least of these commands. So this refers back to Deuteronomy 27:26 and talks about obedience to all of the commands that they have been given, which we talked about in the last passage. And then of course they also talk about teaching others to do the same, which is breaking the commandments. And they will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. And so we had some Romans and 1 Timothy references there. But whoever does and teaches the commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. We've got a Matthew 19:28. And then, for I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven. So we have a bunch of references here: Luke, Matthew, 2 Corinthians, and Philippians. And then I have a couple of notes on the top and the bottom. So down here, we have the Deuteronomy 12:32. Everything that I command you, you shall be careful to do. You shall not add to it or take from it. Luke 16:17 says, but it is easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for one dot of the law to become void. And then Matthew 7:21 says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. And then at the top, I made some notes. Jesus' gospel of the kingdom does not replace the Old Testament, but rather fulfills it as Jesus' life and ministry coupled with his interpretation complete and clarify God's intent and meaning in the entire Old Testament. Righteousness of Jesus' followers outweighs teachers of religious law and Pharisees. So down here where it talks about surpassing the scribes and Pharisees, the Pharisees didn't always, they said they followed the law, but they didn't always follow the law. And they were basically rejecting Jesus when he was on earth. So what it's saying here is that the righteousness of Jesus' followers, which is us as believers, outweighs the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees. So those Pharisees and other teachers in that day who were not believers. So that's basically what that says. So that is lesson 13. There was something on this page which I thought was very interesting, and so I thought I would just read that one. Our salvation does not rest on our ability to keep the law, and it never did. The law was only ever able to reveal the hearts of sinful men. It cannot save them. Christ does both. His righteous life reveals the sin in our hearts, but it also answers our depravity with the hope of the gospel. Jesus fulfilled the law on our behalf, and in him we are saved from the penalty of sin. So again, thank you guys for joining me for this very first volume. This is the 52-week journey, but we have finished actually volume 1. So this is completed. So thank you guys again so much for joining me, and I hope that you got something out of doing this study with me. And if you have any comments, please share those. Any insights that you have are welcome. I'm happy to answer or try to answer any questions if you have them. But again, I'm not a scholar, but I just mostly look things up and try to interpret to the best of my abilities. So thank you again for doing the first part of this study with me. We're going to move on to volume 2, so that will be week 14. I know we are a little behind, but I think that's okay. When we get done, we get done. So thank you for spending the time with me, and have a blessed day.